Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Attorney General, are you aware of the caravan of about 3,000 people approaching the state of Texas?
I have read about it in the news media, yes. I didn't know. I think it's south of Mexico City is what I read.
Yeah, they're
what you're talking about?
Apparently headed toward Texas. So what would you tell these people?
Well, I would tell them not to come, but okay. The job of the Justice Department has to do with prosecution and with the way in which the asylum and removal claims are adjudicated.
All right. Principal. So you would tell them not to come?
It depends on why they are coming.
Well, if they're coming to make asylum claims, what would you tell them?
Well, like the Department of Homeland Security is the agency that's responsible for border control.
Right. I get that, but you're the Attorney General of the United States. Do you think our asylum laws are being abused?
The asylum laws are statutes passed by the Congress.
Yeah. Do you think they're being abused?
I think this is that question is one that has to be evaluated on a one-by-one basis in each.
Have you talked to the border? When's the last time you've been to the border?
I think a week ago, maybe 10 days ago.
Did they tell you anything about asylum claims being made by people that are mostly economic claims, not asylum claims? Did they mention that to you?
I think it's fair. I don't recall exactly. I think it's fair.
You don't recall being told by the Border Patrol that they're overwhelmed, they can't hold the line much anymore, that we've had 1.7 million people apprehended, and the big magnet, the pull factor, is the way the catch and release program around asylum? That didn't stick out to you?
That was not a discussion that I had when I was.
Who did you talk to?
I was at the border at Nogales, spoke to Border Patrol.
Yeah, I was there about 6 months ago. They never mentioned to you the pull factors of illegal immigration?
This was a review of what they were doing at the border with respect to.
Well, it's a simple question. They never mentioned to you that they've got a problem with being overrun by asylum seekers.
I know from reading the news media that Border Patrol agents feel that way.
Well, I mean, it's not about reading the paper. You were there talking to them.
Well, I don't recall that. I don't want to tell you about a conversation that I'm not sure
I'm just stunned that you can't recall that. So let's talk about Afghanistan. The Undersecretary for Defense Policy, Mr. Kale, said, while ISIS-K poses more of a short-term external threat, al-Qaeda could regain the ability to launch attacks outside of Afghanistan within a year or two. Do you agree with that?
I agree that al-Qaeda has always presented and continues to present a persistent threat to the United States homeland.
Well, no, but the question is, what's changed? You say always. Has any recent event changed the likelihood of an attack?
I don't know.
You don't know that we withdrew from Afghanistan?
I know we withdrew. I don't know whether the withdrawal will increase the risk from al-Qaeda or not.
So you're the Attorney General of the United States. Secretary Wray testified openly twice that due to the lack of ability to have eyes and ears on the ground and the unreliability of the Taliban, that an attack on the United States within 6 months, a year is far more likely after a withdrawal. You're not aware that he said that?
The job of the Justice Department and the job of the FBI is to protect against those kind of attacks in the homeland.
Does it make sense that that would be a dynamic of our withdrawal? Do you trust the Taliban to police al-Qaeda and ISIS on our behalf?
I do not trust the Taliban.
Matter of fact, they've openly told us they will not work with us regarding containing the al-Qaeda ISIS threat. Are you aware of that?
I think there's been inconsistent statements, but
no, they just literally said that.
I think there have been inconsistent statements, but their statements are not anything that we can rely on.
Well, when they tell you to your face, we're not going to help you, do you think they're kidding? Do you think they really will help us, but they're just telling us to our face?
I think ISIS-K, al-Qaeda, associated forces are and continue to be.
We're talking about the Taliban. The Taliban has told the United States they will not work with our counterterrorism forces when it comes to al-Qaeda or ISIS. What response should we have regarding the Taliban when they say that?
Well, I think we have a number of different tools available.
Like what?
We have economic sanctions. They need money from the United States for humanitarian and other reasons. But this is a...
So the leverage over the Taliban is whether or not we'll give them money.
Senator, the job of the Justice Department is protecting, using the FBI and the National Security Agency.
The National Security Division is part of our counterterrorism operation, right?
It is one.
Has anybody from the National Security Division briefed you about the increased likelihood of attack emanating from Afghanistan after our withdrawal?
Every day I'm briefed by the FBI.
Now, my question is specific. Has anybody briefed you about the increased likelihood of an attack emanating from Afghanistan by ISIS or al-Qaeda because of our complete withdrawal?
We are worried about the risk of attack by ISIS.
I know it's one thing to be worried. Has anybody told you the likelihood of an attack is greater because of our withdrawal or not?
Different views about the degrees of likelihood. That doesn't change our posture, which is to always be protective.
It doesn't change your posture if you go from a possibility of being attacked to a 6 months to a year time window of being attacked.
We have asked for substantial additional funds for our counterterrorism operations in light of...
Is that in light of the withdrawal from Afghanistan?
In light of a lot of changing circumstances in the world with respect...
Well, let me just put a fine point on this. Secretary Wray has told the world that ISIS and al-Qaeda in Afghanistan present a threat to our homeland. The Taliban has told us they're not going to help us when it comes to policing these groups. The Department of Defense has said we're 6 months to a year away from a possible attack by ISIS and al-Qaeda. And just seems to me there's not a sense of urgency about this.
There is a sense of urgency.
What have you done specifically, and I'll end with this, specifically what have you done since our withdrawal in Afghanistan to deal with this new threat?
We have strengthened and increased the efforts of our joint terrorism task forces. I have met with them.
Literally, what have you done? Just put it in writing. Just write down what you've done.
I'll be happy to have our staff assess what they told you and return.
Thank you, Senator Graham. Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you, Chairman. Welcome, Attorney General Garland. Two topics. The first is executive privilege. We've been through a rather bleak period with regard to executive privilege. I think you could call it the anything goes period, in which any assertion of executive privilege, no matter how fanciful or preposterous, was essentially allowed to stand in very significant departure from the law that has been out there for years regarding executive privilege. And at the same time that the substance of executive privilege was being expanded beyond recognition, the procedure for evaluating executive procedure determinations was completely ignored. And this is a procedure that was established by President Reagan's White House. So we now have a situation in which there is very substantial destruction and disarray in the area of executive privilege determinations. And as you know, under the Reagan memo, the Department of Justice had a role kind of as an arbiter to be the honest broker between whatever executive agency was objecting and whatever congressional committee was pursuing information. That role completely fell apart in the last administration, and it needs to be rebuilt in some predictable fashion. The role of the courts has become highly problematic because delay is very often dispositive in these matters, and the courts are now a haven for delay with respect to executive privilege determinations. So I think we need to look at that as well. Senator Kennedy and I had a hearing on this executive privilege problem in our court subcommittee. The Department of Justice was not represented at that hearing, but I would like to ask you to detail somebody from the Department of Justice to talk to Senator Kennedy and me about this executive privilege problem and work with us on trying to figure out a solution, making the role of the Department of Justice more clear and transparent, and perhaps embodying it in rule or regulation or law, and trying to figure out how to accelerate at the courts a way to get quicker decisions, because otherwise, as I said, delay is just dispositive, and we lose not because we're wrong, but because we're delayed. Would you have somebody be our point of contact on that, please? When I say detail, I don't mean onto our payroll, you know, I just mean as a point of contact.
Yes, absolutely, of course.
Great. Thank you.